Hi there, this is Max from Iridescent Color, and in today's video I would like to talk about saturation. Especially, I'd like to talk about a slightly under-discussed problem with subtractive saturation models and how the new adaptive approach I developed for Iris Saturation Pro version 2 addresses this long-standing issue. You might already be aware that saturation isn't a clearly defined concept and that there are many different models and approaches to calculate saturation. You may also already be aware that many colorists dislike the saturation knob in Resolve for its digital video-like look, and that's because it uses the most rudimentary technique for increasing saturation. In short, it calculates a black and white image based on the luma channel and then defines saturation as the difference between that black and white image and the color image. If we increase saturation, it just increases that difference. And that has two undesirable side effects. Number one is it causes colors to become brighter as we increase saturation, which is what we perceive as a very digital look. It also has implications for how we cognize an image. In the physical world, a reflective surface cannot produce its own color. If we paint a door red, we are actually making it absorb other wavelengths of light, leaving only the red portion of the light to reflect back. That's why colors necessarily become darker as we increase their colorfulness. If we increase a color saturation with the sat knob, surfaces can appear to become emissive, as if they were their own light source, and this breaks visual cognition. Film is of course also a subtractive system, so if we want to create filmic images, we need a subtractive saturation model. And the second undesirable side effect of this saturation approach is that since it uses multiplication, the effect is strongest the more saturated a color already is. And this is almost never what we want, as this causes highly saturated colors to become blown out and garish, while it's really hard to pump a healthy amount of saturation into the meat of the image. Now, you may already be using one of the many different tools to get subtractive saturation models in Resolve, either by using the HSV method, by using color slice, or other DCTLs. And if you do, you may already have noticed that they all have one big problem. If a saturation model makes colors darker when increasing saturation, it necessarily makes them brighter when decreasing saturation. As you can see in this example, this can lead to bright, high-purity colors like these neon lights to become completely blown out and lose all definition. As others have already pointed out, the silly saturation knob in Resolve actually vastly outperforms all these other methods when desaturating, because it preserves luminosity by definition. So let's have a look at the sat curve in this DCTL. The first thing you'll note is that this curve is neither just gain nor gamma nor a combination of the two. Instead, it behaves more like gain the closer we get to zero saturation, but flattens out and compresses at the top, meaning that our saturation channel will never spill over and we can go much further without losing detail. The strongest effect is in medium saturation areas, meaning that we're less likely to increase chroma noise or muddy up neutrals. We can protect skin tones even further by using the preserve neutral slider, but we can also bring down the limit, gently rolling off our maximum saturation to get a more compressed saturation range. Now this is where it gets interesting. We are increasing saturation in some areas and decreasing it in others at the same time. And that's not even taking into account that we might increase saturation in some vectors and decrease it in others. And you simply cannot make this type of adjustment with any other tool without having to make a compromise between getting nice thick subtractive saturation and luminance preserving desaturation. Except that with Iris Saturation Pro, you can. Iris Saturation Pro uses a new adaptive model which responds to the exact saturation curve you draw to make sure it always uses the best operation for each pixel individually, meaning whatever saturation you dial in, Increased saturation follows your preferred mix of a more neutral spherical style of saturation versus really thick subtractive filmic saturation. If a given pixel decreases in saturation, however, the model will always do so in a luminance preserving way, making sure you get none of that weird bleaching out or blowing out issue that other subtractive styles of saturation can lead to. Okay, here's a quick rundown of all the features and functions in Iris Saturation Pro. As always, we have 3 variants. The standard variant is the most straightforward and safest to use for look development. It comes with our 6 basic hue vectors, which are perceptually aligned, as well as a custom hue vector to adjust. We can use highlight mode to see exactly what portion of the image we're affecting with each slider. As mentioned, we have sat limit and preserve neutral sliders to finesse our saturation curve. We can fine-tune how subtractive we'd like our saturation to feel with the subtractive slider. The Lue mask allows us to mask off highlights or shadows, while the weight slider helps us to finesse the mask by broadening or narrowing it smoothly. The surgical version allows you to narrow down the radius of each individual vector. This can give you very precise results, but is more prone to artifacts and not recommended for look development. The dynamic version allows you to adjust each hue vector's center, with adjacent vectors adjusting the radius dynamically. This can help craft more customized nuanced hue versus sat curves, but more care needs to be taken to make sure the adjustments are broad enough not to cause any issues. So that was just a quick overview over all the features. You can of course download the demo to try out this new adaptive model and see how you find it in practice. And if you have any more questions, you can also drop me an email or just comment below this video, and I'll be happy to answer any of the questions as best I can. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe even learned something new. And I hope you like the new features in Iris Saturation Pro version 2. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.